In this lesson, we're going to start building our quiz application. So we're going to go to Xcode and we're going to create a new Xcode project. We're going to make sure it's a single view application. I'm going to call it My Quiz. And for your organization name, again, it doesn't matter what this is. Make sure your language is Swift. We'll leave it the universal for right now. We'll hit Next. You can save it in the location of your choice. For me, I'm going to save it in my developer folder. We hit Create. And now I have a blank project started up. So we're going to first go to our main storyboard and see that I have one view controller set up already. Because we're going to have several views in our application, we're going to want a way to navigate between those. So I'm actually going to embed this view controller within a navigation controller. And the way to do that is I'm going to go to Editor, Embed in, Navigation Controller. And you can see that Xcode will automatically add a navigation controller for me. And it's connected to this initial view controller. And you see that I have a navigation bar built in already. So in order to control this, we're going to need to create our own custom class. So I'm going to hit Command N to get a new file. I want to make sure it's a Cocoa Touch class. And I'm going to call this our Home View Controller. I'm going to make sure it's a subclass of UI View Controller. Hit Next. Make sure it's a subgroup of my quiz. And I'm going to hit Create. And again, this is the first screen that the user will see if they're already logged in. What will happen is if they are currently logged in, they'll see the play or add a new question buttons. And if they're not logged in, it's going to automatically take the user to the login screen where they can either log in or sign up. We're going to go to the interface builder and we're just going to add a label that for right now is just going to keep track of any error messages that I get or tell us if the user is logged in or not. We're going to get rid of this later, so I'm not going to worry about putting any constraints on it because I'm just going to delete it later. And let's go ahead and open up the assistant editor. And I'm going to create an outlet for this label. And I'll call it status label. And again, we're just putting this in to make sure our code works. And once we know that it does work, we're going to delete this later. All right, now that we have the beginnings of our class, let's make sure it's selected. And then I'm going to go to the identity inspector. And I'm going to change the class from view controller to home view controller. And so now that it's using my custom class rather than the default view controller. And since I'm not going to use this view controller anymore, the one that it came with, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this and move it to the trash. Okay, so now I have a view here that's being used by my home view controller. And before I can do anything like logging in, I have to configure this project to work with BaasBox. And the way to do that is, do you remember when we were downloading BaasBox, there was the option to download an SDK? Well, you need to copy those SDK files over to BaasBox. So I'm going to navigate to where I downloaded those, which would be my downloads folder. So in your iOS SDK folder, you'll see a number of files. And what I need to do is I'm going to highlight all these files. I'm going to hit Command A. And I'm just going to go ahead and drag them over here in the left side into my project navigator and copy them over. I'm going to make sure it says copy items if needed. And I'm going to hit Finish. And if we did this right, we're going to create a bridging header. These BaasBox files were written in Objective-C, which was the language before Swift. So we need to create a bridging header that'll connect Swift to Objective-C. So let's go ahead and do that. Create bridging header. And you can see all the BaasBox files are now in my project. In order to neaten this up a little bit, if you want to create a special group, so I'm going to click on this. I'm going to select all these files. And if I right click or control click, I can choose new group from selection, and it'll create a group with all those folders in it, and I'll call it BaasBox Files. And now it looks a little bit neater, and if I need to get to those files, I can click in there. So in order, the one last thing I have to do for my project to use BaasBox is I have to go to that bridging header I just created and add one line. I have to do a # import BAA client.h. This is just an Objective-C file that my bridging header needs access to. So once that's done, I should be ready to use any of the BaasBox commands in my project. Actually, there's one more thing we have to do, and that's tell our app where BaasBox is located. So we can do that in the did finish launching with options method in the app delegate folder. So all I need to do is go to, actually let's just go back to this so I can see the whole thing. Right before the return true statement, I'm going to go to BaasBox and then set base URL in parentheses. And if you're doing this at home, you're going to use probably http://localhost 9000. 9000 is the port that it uses. If you're doing this as part of this class, you're going to use the URL given to you in class. So we need the URL and we need the app code. And we're just going to use the default app code. And every BaasBox default app code is 123456789 Whoops, I forgot to capitalize the B here. There we go. So now when this app is run, it knows to look here for the BaasBox installation. So now we're finally ready to start creating our app, and we'll start working on the ability to log in the next lesson.